Hey guys, what's up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today is a shorter day, like I said before, right? The market was closed yesterday for American Thanksgiving, and today, kind of as a follow-up to that, the market is closing earlier at 1 p.m. Eastern, which is in about 7 minutes from now as I am recording. But I don't expect too much movement happening for the remainder of the, the 6 minutes, whatever is left. So thought I'd record the video now. But all that being said and done, let's just jump into it. If you guys enjoy, don't forget to hit that like button. Again, none of this is financial advice. Tesla ending the day pretty much flat, pretty much ending at around $183 per share, which isn't too bad whatsoever. Now, we did have a bit of a beautiful run up in the morning today, right? We ended up going pre-market. Actually, we ended up going as high as, you can see, pretty much this 187 level, which is a level I talked about the other day. I'm sure you guys can remember. I think it was actually on Wednesday how I said how I personally wouldn't be surprised if Tesla ends up actually coming up to 187, touching that, and then potentially we get the rejection off of that, and then most likely off of that we can you get it to stop? And then off of that we essentially come down to retest this overall breakout of this line that I've been talking about, right? Which is essentially what happened. Now, obviously, during the actual trading hours, we didn't come up to 187. We did that pre-market, which kind of counts for it in a way, right, in my opinion. So that's something to consider. So pretty much following the exact game plan that I have laid out for you guys the other day on Wednesday, I believe it was, right? So pretty much so far, so good, right? As long as this kind of maintains and we kind of hold it. And so far we have been. You can see we did enter this territory once again, but we essentially bounced off of it perfectly and also maintaining above the 182 and this trend line. So far, so good. Like, this is kind of more or less what I want to see. This, potentially can retest it one more time on Monday, potentially. But ultimately, at the very moment, as it stands right as of right this very moment, this is more or less what I personally want to be seeing, especially closing above that 182 level. Yeah, this is good. This is great. This is, pretty much textbook in my opinion. Extremely minimal volume. Of course, keep in mind it is a shorter day, plus of course essentially a holiday, right? So those two things together naturally will make us have, obviously pretty low volume today relative to the previous days especially. But all that being said and done, we are retesting the breakout. We are doing it so far successfully. I just want to make sure that maintains. Now I want to see follow through, and I definitely think Tesla can at the very least come up to maybe even 200. I really wouldn't be surprised if we at the very least touch 195 to 200 first, and then from there we can of course start readjusting and reassessing as to where we can go. But overall, kind of what I was talking about back when we were here, the major levels for me that I really want to see being broken by Tesla is of course 200 to 204. If we can get and start closing especially daily candles above that level, that will be fantastic, and then we can really start potentially making our way back up to these levels over here. Right now, if you want to look at something that's kind of like a slightly longer time frame, that could be an overall bullish situation. I'm personally foreseeing that we can maybe get an inverted head and shoulders potentially setting up. So for instance, we have the left shoulder here, we have the head that essentially formed off of this move that we had the past 2 weeks or so right here. And then if, let's say, we come up and break above the 200 level, and let's say we come up all the way up to this 230 level once again and maybe get slapped back down, as long as we kind of maintain this 200 level, that'll be great. So essentially this would be this, right? And from here, let's say for instance we go up here, come back down to this level over here, form the potential right shoulder, and then bounce off of that, eventually break 300, which will trigger this inverted head and shoulders pattern, and that will be an ultimate bullish situation. Now that is quite bullish, right? Not impossible, but it is, I would say, especially granted how the market looks right now, with the SPY and how I did talk about, I personally believe the SPY QQQ essentially approaching major resistance very, very soon. Again, 405 to 410 for SPY. Makes it hard to see something like this, such a bullish scenario for Tesla play out. Not impossible, of course, with Tesla especially, anything is possible. But it just, part of me is not fully convinced yet. Let's just say that we would actually have to see that whole situation play out and really start seeing it form in order for me to really start being like, okay, this can actually happen. But that's just kind of a theory. That's just an example of what can potentially happen down the road if things play out the way I'm hoping it will. But it doesn't mean it will, of course, right? But all that being said and done, that's kind of what I'm seeing at the very moment, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm pretty excited. The bullish divergence you can see on Tesla is still looking quite solid, still making higher highs over here compared to these levels, even though the stock is actually lower than these levels over here, you can see, which is also a pretty decent sign. So nice little bullish divergence on the daily, on the 4 hour, etc. Looking pretty good in my opinion so far. You can see as the stock was essentially making its way downwards like this, you can see here we were making our way upwards like this, right? Just as an example. So something to keep in mind, I guess, right? That's essentially what a bullish divergence is. Going back to the daily, however, taking a quick look at, for instance, the 21 EMA, right, which will of course act as a resistance for us. It's 195 to 200 to 204. That whole 10-point range will be definitely an issue. Major resistance that we will need to break above. But I do believe that I honestly think we will break above it, mainly because, we essentially have finally broken out of this massive downward bullish wedge that we have been forming for a long time. Now, again, if you want to be extra cautious, you can argue that we haven't broken out of it just yet, and that this is the true breakout pattern or the breakout line, which we're still actually approaching, which will essentially be this kind of almost 190-ish level, right? You can definitely make that argument, and in my opinion, it is a plausible argument. But I also think this is also a plausible argument because not only have we never closed a candle above these levels, essentially, as you can see, right, quite obviously, but on top of that, we are also playing out a beautiful breakout into a retest that happens to line up with this as well. So hard to say which one is considered the more valid approach. If you want to be extra cautious and extra safe, this is the more extra cautious and extra safe approach. If you want to be a little bit more generous, if you will, this is the approach instead, right? So it really just depends on how you want to play it out, right? But that's just kind of what, you should be looking at for both scenarios, just in case, to be extra safe. Something to consider as well. All that being said and done, guys, I am liking the way it looks. The Bollinger Band, of course, the white line will act as a resistance for us initially as well, around that general area. The 50 and the 200 are well above us. I personally wouldn't be surprised if we maybe even rally all the way up to the 50 and then potentially get rejected from that. That'd be pretty, promising, I guess. And the 5 and the 10, the shorter terms, you can see we're well above the 5, and the 10 we are actually still pretty much sitting right at it, acting as a bit of a resistance so far, but nothing too crazy in my opinion as of right now as well. And the final thing I want to definitely take a look at, as per usual, is of course going to be this weekly time frame, which is also really, really good to look at. Now on the weekly, you can see not as a convincing of a breakout, right, on the weekly, right? So definitely not as convincing, right? There's definitely a chance that we haven't truly actually broken out of this just yet. And on top of that, the weekly is not showing any bullish divergences that we have been seeing on the daily, the 4, the 3, the 2 hour, right? So keep that in mind. The weekly does still look ultimately a little bit weak overall, but to take that into consideration, the actual candle itself, you can see it's not necessarily a hammer candle, but it's definitely damn close to it. If we can maybe somehow get a nice little, the market closed, never mind. So yeah, we didn't get the rally towards the end that I thought we would. I mean, the market's still moving, even though it's supposed to be closed. I don't know. Anyway, we didn't get the rally near the end that I maybe was hoping we can get an actual true textbook hammer candle. But this is really not far from it. The wick at the top is not very long. The wick at the bottom is very long. And it is still roughly a hammer candle. It's just the less of a wick at the top, the better. And the longer this is, the better as well. So, not the best looking hammer candle, but definitely a hammer candle in my opinion also. So that's also a pretty decent sign on the weekly, which could also be a beautiful sign of a potential reversal on the horizon, which is great. On top of that, we also did close above 180. So, it was pretty spooky because we did fall pretty low below 180 on this weekly time frame. But even on the shorter week, we still managed to close above it on okay volume as well, even though we had not only a full day off, but also a half day today, still showing pretty decent respectable volume on this kind of play, which is really, really good. But ultimately, we are holding above that 180 crucial level and closing above that, like I did talk about several times. And more importantly, arguably, is the fact that we did close higher than the weekly candle of the previous week, which is also fairly bullish. So ultimately, guys, I'm not feeling too bad. I really am not feeling too bad. In my opinion, again, just my opinion, Tesla's actually looking quite good. The only caution I would advise is the fact that the market itself, the SPY and the QQQ, are, again, in my opinion, very close to some pretty significant resistance, which could technically weigh in on Tesla in a negative way and put pressure to the downside, even though Tesla right now, just through technical analysis, actually looks fairly bullish and looks like it does want to actually run up potentially into the 200s. That's just kind of what I'm seeing. We'll see what it actually turns out being, but that's pretty much what I see at the very moment. So all that being said and done, ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you're thinking down below. Hope you guys have a wonderful Thanksgiving, or had a wonderful Thanksgiving if you live in America. But all that being said and done, let me know what you think down below. Hope you have a great weekend regardless, and I'll see you guys on Monday. Peace.